When I was young, my mom rented me a little black and white movie from our local library called Frankenstein. That movie changed my life. The acting, the cinematography, the plot, the genuine terror that came out of the story resonated with me. I identified with Frankenstein, a misunderstood creature that just wanted to be loved. And after it was over, I sought out all of the other classics: Dracula, The Wolfman, The Mummy, Bride of Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Phantom of the Opera. And I realized that all of the movies had one thing in common. They were all produced by Universal Studios. So naturally, when I got older and learned that Universal Studios put on a Halloween event every year that drew from their catalog of horror movies that made me feel like I could live inside those movies, I was overjoyed. This is the story of that event. This is the story of Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios Hollywood. I'm Cameron West, and you're watching Haunt Season. With horror booming in the 1970s, theme parks saw an opportunity to cash in on the craze. In Southern California, one of the oldest theme parks in the country, Knott's Berry Farm, launched an annual Halloween event in 1973 called Knott's Scary Farm. This event was a great success, and to directly compete with it, Universal Studios Hollywood, realizing it could capitalize on its catalog of horror properties, decided to launch its own Halloween experience. Horror Nights, as it would become known, opened in 1986 and ran for just 2 nights. At a cost of $14.95 per ticket, guests were presented with a showcase of Universal's horror movie history, using the park's existing sets, such as the Bates Motel, and running its famous tram tour at night, dubbed the Terror Tram, with an alternate, spooky script. The event was a massive hit and sold out very quickly. Unfortunately, though, an accident on the nighttime tram tour led to the death of an employee, and this caused Horror Nights to be put on hiatus, not returning the following year. Fast forward to 1991 and jump across the country to Orlando. After a lackluster opening in 1990 due to several rides not working as intended, Universal Studios Florida started actively looking for a way to increase already dipping attendance to their brand new park. With Jaws the Ride still not opening as promised, Universal Studios Florida's president, Jay Stein, realizing he needed a new hit, approached Julie Zimmerman, who had helped to create the park, and suggested that they come up with a special ticketed event to help drive attendance. Julie, picking up where Universal Hollywood had left off, began working on a new idea: a Halloween-themed party which would operate on a small budget using mostly recycled assets already owned by the park. The event would see street performers brought in, some musical acts, and the birth of Universal's first haunted house, the Dungeon of Terror, which would be located in the oversized and still unused Jaws queue line. This house was relatively short, but proved to be overwhelmingly popular with guests, seeing lines 3 hours long at certain points during the night. The event would run for 3 nights on October 25th, 26th, and 31st, and would cost just $12.95. On these dates, the park would close to the general public at 5 p.m. and open back up again from 6 p.m. until midnight, being officially branded as Fright Nights. The event was incredibly popular with guests, and this prompted Universal Studios Hollywood to take another look at putting on its own Halloween-themed event. So, in 1992, Universal Studios Hollywood reintroduced Horror Nights to its fans. Don Burgess and Sarah Whitten were in charge of reintroducing the event, which saw nearly 300 people cast, mostly high school students eager to get a chance at scaring guests. The event was noted for using 4,000 gallons of fake blood, 2,000 gallons of green slime,
He slimed me. That's great!
1,000 trained rats, and cost nearly $2 million to produce. Horror Nights 1992 would run for 6 nights and cost $27 for admission, featuring non-stop shows including a horror-themed Penn and Teller magic show to headline called The Bad Boys of Magic, as well as Beetlejuice's Rockin' Graveyard Review, a variety musical show, and Chucky's In-Your-Face Insults, a show where Chucky would hurl insults at any guest who dared approach him. The Terror Tram would also make its glorious comeback, this time with no live actors attacking it. 2 houses would be featured. The first, Maze of Maniacs, would be a twisted asylum filled with mutants and misfits. The second, Nightmare Alley, would be themed to an old film vault and feature Universal's movie Monsters and Maniacs. The event would also feature an NBC special taking place during it on October 23rd at 11:30 p.m. called Halloween Jam at Universal Studios Live. This special was presented by Woody Harrelson and Elvira and would see the hosts attempt to make it through the mazes and shows while bands such as AC/DC and Ozzy Osbourne played sets in the background. The demand for tickets to Horror Nights was insane. On every night, guests were turned away at the gate, which led to people trespassing on Universal property just to get in. And this led to so many people being packed into the park that guests complained that they didn't get to see everything. Because of a better than expected turnout and poor management of the event, Universal needed to take another break and learn a few lessons before continuing on. The event wouldn't make a return until 1996. Kind of. When, wanting to again try something new, Universal opened a singular haunted maze. Not in the park, but at neighboring City Walk. This maze was called the Universal Studios Chamber of Chills and consisted of 9 corridors and 11 rooms, having a total floor space of 6,480 square feet and staffed by 130 scare actors. This maze would feature scenes from several Universal horror movies, culminating in a finale based on The Exorcist. The house was well received, but the common complaint from guests was that they just wanted more. So, in 1997, the actual Horror Nights returned with a vengeance. This year, the event would be more streamlined. Instead of packing every inch of the park with smaller shows, as they did in 1992, Universal focused on presenting 4 walkthrough houses and 6 shows. The tickets were limited to a certain amount each night. Outside security was brought in, and alcohol sales were restricted, all in order to bring a better experience to guests. The houses consisted of the Crypt Keeper's Film Vault, a combination of great scare scenes from an assortment of recent horror movies, classic Monster Maze, an excursion through a black and white maze where guests came face to face with Universal's classic monsters, Area 51, a trip through a secret military site where guests were confronted by aliens, and the Monster Aquarium, a haunted aquarium where guests came face to face with all manner of escaped aquatic monsters. The shows this year consisted of the Circus of Horrors, a carnival sideshow themed show, Chucky's Insult Emporium, the same show resurrected from 1992, Beetlejuice's Rockin' Graveyard Review again, and, brought over from Orlando, the incredibly popular Bill and Ted's Halloween Adventure, which focused on Bill and Ted trying to save TV from the evil cyberspace witch, incorporating pop culture references and political satire, which would run until 2013 when it was tragically shut down for being too offensive. This year proved to be the monumental success that Universal knew Horror Nights could be, and so, for the next few years, Horror Nights continued on, getting bigger and bigger each and every year. 1998 saw 3 of the mazes return, yet slightly reskinned, with the only new maze being Clive Barker's Freaks. Freaks was designed to be a living movie and took over an entire soundstage, incorporating 12 rooms and 35 professional actors to scare guests. The shows followed suit, with most being only slightly rethemed, with the two big new shows being the ultimate tribute to Kiss by the cover band Black Diamond, and Slaughterworld, a horror-themed reskin of the daytime Waterworld stunt show, which added more death-defying elements. Another tradition that started this year was the horror industry's Igor Awards, basically the Oscars for horror, which helped to give California's Horror Nights a little bit of that Hollywood glamour. 1999 would see several new mazes, such as the thrilling, chilling world of Rob Zombie, a living, movie-style maze incorporating incredibly intense thrills. Hell on Earth, a new Clive Barker maze that saw guests enter eternal damnation. The Mummy, based on and constructed by Stephen Sommers, who directed the Mummy reboot franchise for Universal. Creature Features, another Universal classic monster maze, and Cleaver's Meat Locker. With momentum behind them, Universal entered the 2000 season looking to be the biggest and baddest Halloween event on the planet. The first of 5 mazes this year would be based on the hit TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, called Buffy and Angel Hellmouth Haunt, which would see guests enter an episode complete with live stunt actors portraying Buffy battling vampires. Clive Barker also returned for a third and final time with his original maze, Harvest, based on a nightmare he had about guests transitioning from the real world into a haunted crypt where they would confront the Queen of the Monsters. Another returning creator would be Rob Zombie, who this year presented the House of 1,000 Corpses maze, the history of which you can find in another video on this channel. The fourth maze would see a new legend in the WWE's The Undertaker create a maze called No Mercy. This steampunk-themed maze would see guests enter a machine and witness the terrifying life of The Undertaker. The final maze, Theater of Blood, saw the return of the Universal classic monsters being joined by some more modern horrors. The memorable piece of this maze was a scene which required 3D glasses, which Universal did not supply, that would make guests feel like they were in the shower scene from the movie Psycho. A first this year was the introduction of Universal's first scare zone, based on the video game Nightmare Creatures 2. Although small, this zone would lead Universal to make scare zones a staple of its Halloween event in the future. 6 different shows featured this year, mostly returners such as Bill and Ted's and Chucky. And although this year was a resounding success, the following year would not see Horror Nights return. In fact, the event wouldn't return until 2006, and still to this day, no one is quite sure why. It's believed that a combination of the 9/11 attacks causing a lack of travel in the United States, coupled with outrageous operating costs which may not have been recouped, and several problems arising from alcohol being allowed at the event, pushed Universal to put Halloween on the back burner, choosing instead to focus on new and revamped daytime experiences at the park. However, all was not lost. Somewhere in a quiet corner of the backlot, a brand new team was silently preparing what would become a massive rebirth of the Horror Nights brand. The early years of Horror Nights were difficult, plagued by accidents, hurdles, and directional challenges. But they set the stage for a prolific run that was about to take place. Join us in 2 weeks for the second half of this story, when we jump into what I like to call the Murdy years. That was Haunt Season. I'm Cameron West, and stay tuned for part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and check out the rest of the content on our channel. And if you have an idea for a haunted attraction or place that we should talk about in the future, please leave your thoughts in the comments below.